The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers stretched high above the gathered delegates, its translucent walls casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Representatives from over 300 species filled the circular arena, their forms ranging from the towering crystalline Zephyrians to the small, quick-moving Valtari. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different languages into something resembling communication. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the human delegation's assigned position, his dress uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. Beside him, Dr. Lisa Parker adjusted her tablet nervously while Chief Engineer Ryan Davis checked his presentation materials one final time. Ambassador Kate Sullivan maintained her diplomatic smile, though her hands trembled slightly as she held the formal membership application. Today was supposed to be humanity's moment of triumph. After decades of careful diplomacy, successful trade agreements, and countless missions to prove their worth, Earth's children were finally ready to join the galactic community as full members. The application had been submitted months ago, reviewed by countless committees, and approved by the preliminary councils. Everything seemed perfect. The ceremony began with the traditional welcome chants, each species adding their voice to the ancient melody that had opened council sessions for over 1,000 years. Morrison felt a surge of pride as he heard the human delegation join in, their voices blending with the cosmic choir. This was what they had worked for, what humanity had dreamed of since first looking up at the stars. Chancellor Vexthara of the Zephyrian Empire rose from her crystalline throne, her form catching the light and throwing it back in brilliant displays. As the current rotating president of the Galactic Confederation, she would be the one to formally welcome humanity into the fold. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the musical quality that made her species natural diplomats. Honored delegates. She began, her words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. We gather today to consider the petition of the species, known as humans, for full membership in our ancient and noble confederation. Morrison straightened, ready to step forward when called. The formal presentation would be brief, he knew. Most of the real work had been done in private meetings and committee reviews. This was meant to be a celebration, a moment of unity as the galaxy welcomed its newest members, but something was wrong. The Chancellor's tone carried an edge that made Morrison's military instincts flare to life. Around the chamber, he noticed other delegates shifting uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with the human section. Dr. Parker touched his arm gently, her expression concerned. However, Vexthara continued, her voice growing colder, after extensive review and consideration, this council has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's application. The word unanimous hit Morrison like a physical blow. In his years of diplomatic experience, he had never heard of a truly unanimous decision in the Galactic Council. There were always holdouts, always species that abstained or offered conditional support. Unanimous meant something had gone terribly wrong. The species called humans, the Chancellor announced, her melodic voice now carrying unmistakable contempt, are nothing more than primitive warmongers from a backwater planet. They have contributed nothing of value to galactic civilization. Their technology is crude, their culture barbaric, and their very presence diminishes this noble assembly. Stunned silence filled the chamber. Morrison felt the blood drain from his face as the words sank in. Beside him, Kate Sullivan's diplomatic composure cracked, her mouth falling open in shock. Ryan Davis clenched his fists, his engineering mind struggling to process the sudden reversal of everything they had been told. High Counselor Mordick of the Hegemony rose next, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. Where Vexthara had been coldly elegant, Mordick was brutally direct. These humans wage war upon their own kind, he declared, his voice booming without need for amplification. They destroy their own world with their primitive industries and thoughtless expansion. They are unfit to stand among the enlightened races of the galaxy. One by one, other delegates stood to add their voices to the condemnation. The Altarian Republic spokesperson called humans violent savages who know only conquest and destruction. The ethereal collective's representative described them as spiritually void beings who lack the capacity for true enlightenment. Even the small Kathmori delegate, whose species humanity had helped establish first contact protocols, spoke of humans as dangerous children playing with forces beyond their understanding. Morrison forced himself to remain standing as the insults continued. His military training kept his face neutral, but inside he was reeling. How had this happened? The preliminary meetings had been positive, even enthusiastic. Trade agreements had been successful, cultural exchanges had been welcomed. What had changed? Dr. Parker was taking notes frantically, her scientific mind trying to catalog every statement for later analysis. Ryan Davis had gone pale, his usual confidence shattered by the unexpected assault. Kate Sullivan was fighting back tears, her carefully planned diplomatic responses useless in the face of such orchestrated hostility. The attacks continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Each species seemed eager to demonstrate their rejection of humanity, as if association with Earth's children would somehow contaminate their own standing in the galactic community. Ancient civilizations that had existed for millennia spoke of humans as if they were a disease to be quarantined. "They came to us claiming to seek peace," declared the Mystic Confederation's elder, "but their history shows only violence and war. They have never known true harmony, never achieved the spiritual evolution that marks civilized species. They are a threat to the very concept of galactic unity." Finally, Chancellor Vexthara raised her hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet except for the soft hum of translation devices. "The Galactic Confederation's decision is final," she announced. "Humanity's application for membership is rejected. Furthermore, this council recommends that all trade agreements with the human species be terminated and that contact be limited to essential communications only." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Morrison felt the weight of every human dream, every hope for a place among the stars, crashing down around him. Behind him, he could hear other members of the delegation struggling to contain their emotions. Years of work, decades of preparation, all destroyed in a single session. "The human delegation will depart immediately," Vexthara continued. "This council has spoken." Morrison stepped forward, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "May we ask what specifically has changed since our preliminary approvals? What new information has influenced this decision?" The Chancellor's crystalline features seemed to sharpen with disdain. "Nothing has changed, Admiral Morrison. We simply realized that our initial assessment was mistaken. Humanity has nothing to offer the galaxy except primitive aggression and cultural contamination. You are dismissed." The human delegation gathered their materials in silence, each person struggling with the magnitude of their failure. As they walked toward the exit, Morrison could feel thousands of alien eyes watching them, judging them, finding them wanting. The great dream of humanity's place among the stars had become a nightmare of rejection and humiliation. But as they reached the chamber doors, Morrison made a quiet promise to his team, his voice low enough that only they could hear. "They want to see what humans are capable of," he said, his military resolve hardening into something dangerous. "Let's show them." The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the human delegation alone in the corridor while behind them the galaxy celebrated their rejection. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened 3 days after the galactic rejection, bringing together representatives from every nation on the planet. President Helen Carter stood at the podium in the Great Assembly Hall, her face grave as she addressed the gathered delegates. The weight of humanity's humiliation hung heavy in the air, and angry voices had been demanding answers since the news broke. "My fellow humans," President Carter began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "we have all seen the reports from Nexus Prime. Our delegation was not simply rejected but insulted and dismissed as primitive warmongers. The galactic community has made their position clear." Admiral Morrison sat in the front row, still wearing his dress uniform from the failed ceremony. Beside him, Dr. Lisa Parker clutched a thick folder of notes while Kate Sullivan stared at her, hands, the diplomatic failure weighing heavily on her shoulders. Ryan Davis had been quiet since their return, his usual engineering confidence shattered by the unexpected turn of events. "The question before us now," Carter continued, "is how humanity responds to this rejection. Do we retreat from the stars and accept their judgment, or do we prove them wrong about who we are and what we represent?" Senator Bill Murphy from the North American Federation stood up, his voice angry and loud. "Madam President, these aliens have insulted not just our delegation but every human being who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of our place among them. We should be preparing for war, not sitting here talking about proving anything to anyone." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, but Carter raised her hand for silence. "Before we make any decisions about our response, I believe we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Dr. Marcus Webb from the Xenobiology Institute has been conducting research that may shed light on our situation. Dr. Webb approached the podium, his arms full of data tablets and research materials. He was a thin man with graying hair who had spent most of his career studying alien cultures from afar. Now his work had suddenly become the most important. Research on Earth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice nervous but determined, "my team has been quietly analyzing galactic records and cultural databases for the past 5 years. What we've discovered about the species that rejected us is both surprising and disturbing." He activated the holographic display, showing images of the Zephyrian homeworld. Chancellor Vexthara's people achieved their current peaceful state only after a 1,000-year war that left their planet a wasteland. Over 90% of their population died in conflicts that made our world wars look like minor disagreements. The images shifted to show the hegemony's territory, vast regions of space marked in red. High Counselor Mordecai's species practices systematic genocide against what they call lesser races. They have completely destroyed 17 different civilizations in the past century alone. Their idea of diplomacy is surrender or extinction. More images flashed across the display, each one revealing hidden truths about the species that had called humanity primitive. The Altarian Republic maintains their advanced technology through slave labor from conquered worlds. The Ethereal Collective has never achieved true enlightenment but instead uses mind control to create artificial harmony. The Mystic Confederations. Spiritual evolution came at the cost of sacrificing their own emotions and free will. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't enlightened species judging humanity's shortcomings, but civilizations that had buried their own dark histories under layers of technology and time. Captain Amy Rodriguez of the deep space vessel Endeavour stood up from her seat. "Dr. Webb, are you saying that every species that rejected us has a history of violence worse than our own?" Webb nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I'm saying, Captain. The difference is that we're honest about our flaws. We don't hide our wars or pretend our environmental problems don't exist. We admit that we're still learning and growing as a species." Dr. Parker finally spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. "They called us primitive because we told them about our struggles with war and pollution. They said we were unfit for galactic society because we didn't claim to have solved all our problems. While they," Webb continued, "have simply learned to hide their problems behind superior technology and cultural mythology. They've convinced themselves that their past doesn't matter because they've moved beyond it." President Carter stepped back to the podium, her expression thoughtful. "So we're dealing with species that judge us by standards they themselves never met. They want us to pretend we're perfect when perfection isn't possible." General Patricia Collins, the military's top strategist, stood up. "Madam President, this changes everything. If these species are as flawed as Dr. Webb suggests, then maybe the problem isn't that we're unworthy of joining them. Maybe the problem is that we're too good for their system." The chamber erupted in excited conversation as the implications of this revelation spread. For 3 days, humanity had been nursing wounded pride in considering themselves failures. Now they were learning that their supposed superiors were hypocrites who had simply hidden their own failures better. Ambassador Danny Foster, who had been working on outreach programs, raised his hand for attention. "My team has been in contact with several minor species over the past year. Many of them are tired of the Confederation's rigid hierarchy and impossible standards. They're looking for alternatives. Professor Carl Mitchell from the Cultural Analysis Department added his voice. Our studies show that the current galactic system is based on fear and dominance, not cooperation and growth. Species join the Confederation not because they want to, but because they have no choice. President Carter listened to the growing excitement in the chamber, then raised her hand for silence. I'm hearing a lot of anger and frustration, which is understandable, but I want us to think carefully about our response. We could try to expose their hypocrisy, but that would make us just like them. We could withdraw from galactic affairs entirely, but that would abandon countless species who might benefit from our help. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders. Or we could show them what real civilization looks like. We could demonstrate that strength comes from admitting weakness, that growth comes from facing problems honestly, and that true leadership means helping others rather than dominating them. Admiral Morrison stood up, his military bearing proud despite the recent humiliation. Madam President, what exactly are you proposing? Carter smiled for the first time since the rejection. I'm proposing that we give them exactly what they asked, for they want to see what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be something we're not. They want to see our true nature. The chamber buzzed with anticipation as she continued. Let's show them that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our military might. Let's show them that our greatest weapon is our humanity itself. The session continued late into the night as humanity began planning not for war or withdrawal, but for something far more dangerous to the established galactic order. They began planning to be themselves. Earth had transformed into something resembling a massive beehive in the months following the galactic rejection. Every major city buzzed with activity as humanity prepared for what President Carter had called Operation Mirror's Edge. The name itself carried meaning. They would hold up a mirror to the galaxy and show them what real civilization looked like. General Patricia Collins stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon, but the maps spread across her tables showed no battle plans or invasion routes. Instead, they displayed star charts marked with species in need, worlds facing crises, and civilizations struggling under the weight of the Confederation's indifference. This was a different kind of war, one where victory meant healing rather than conquest. The Kethmori system is facing a plague that their medical technology can't handle, reported Dr. Simon Blake, his tablet displaying detailed biological data. Their population has dropped by 30% in the past 2 years, and the Confederation has offered no assistance because they're considered a minor species. Commander Rachel Torres nodded from her position at the communications console. I've been monitoring their distress signals. They're not even asking for help anymore because they know no one will come. Collins studied the data with the eye of a strategist who had spent decades planning military operations. But this time, instead of calculating how to defeat an enemy, she was figuring out how to save them. What do we need to help them? A medical team, basic supplies, and maybe 6 months of research time, Blake replied. Our doctors think they can develop a treatment using Earth-based medicine combined with what we know about their biology. Do it, Collins said without hesitation. What else? The reports continued throughout the day. The Veltari mining colonies were being worked to death by Confederation overseers. The Nimhai refugees had been displaced by a corporate war and abandoned on a barren moon. The Torchwi were losing their homeworld to industrial pollution, but couldn't afford the cleanup technology. Each crisis represented an opportunity for humanity to demonstrate their true nature. Where the Confederation saw problems to be ignored or minor species to be exploited, humans saw people who needed help. Ambassador Danny Foster had been working around the clock to establish communication with these forgotten worlds. His team included linguist Dr. Monica Hughes, who had mastered 47 different alien languages, and Professor Carl Mitchell, whose understanding of alien cultures had become invaluable in approaching each species correctly. The key, Foster explained to the assembled team, is that we're not going to these worlds as conquerors or even as saviors. We're going as neighbors who happen to have something that might help. Captain Nina Walsh was training the new generation of human explorers who would carry out these missions. Her training facility had been converted from a military academy into something that resembled a combination of medical school, engineering workshop, and diplomatic academy. Remember, she told her students, you're not representing Earth as much as you're representing what humanity can be. Every action you take will be studied and judged. Show them that strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Lieutenant Tony Baker, one of Walsh's star pupils, raised his hand. Captain, what if we encounter resistance? What if some of these species don't want our help? Then we respect their decision and move on, Walsh replied. Force is the old way, the Confederation way. We're showing them a new way. The preparation phase revealed just how different humanity's approach would be from anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of advanced warships, they were building hospital ships and mobile research stations. Instead of training soldiers, they were training doctors, engineers, and teachers. Instead of seeking resources to exploit, they were looking for ways to share their own. Dr. Ashley Roberts had been tasked with documenting every aspect of the operation. Her role was crucial because the galaxy would be watching, and every success or failure would be analyzed by countless alien intelligence agencies. We're not just trying to help these species, she explained to her documentation team. We're trying to prove that there's a better way to organize galactic civilization. Every mission has to be perfect. The pressure was enormous, but so was the determination. Humanity had been called primitive and violent, dismissed as unworthy of galactic society. Now they would prove that their accusers had been looking at civilization through the wrong lens entirely. Commander Steve Parker was assigned to lead the mission to the Kethmori homeworld. His team included Dr. Ellen Hayes, a specialist in alien biology, and engineer Kelly Wright, who could adapt human technology to work with alien systems. They would be the first to test humanity's new approach. We go in with nothing but medical supplies and good intentions, Parker told his team during their final briefing. We don't ask for payment, political concessions, or strategic advantages. We help because that's what neighbors do. The concept was so foreign to galactic politics that Parker's team had to practice explaining it repeatedly. Most species would assume hidden motives, secret agendas, or long-term manipulation. The idea that humans would simply help because it was the right thing to do was almost incomprehensible, Lieutenant. Colonel Greg Martinez was coordinating the logistics of 17 different missions simultaneously. His command center looked like air traffic control for the entire galaxy, with ships departing Earth on schedules that would have impressed the most efficient military operation. The beauty of this approach, Martinez explained to his staff, is that we're not competing with anyone. We're not trying to outbuild the Zephyrians or outfight the hegemony. We're doing something they can't do because they've forgotten how. The missions began launching in the 6th month after the rejection. Each ship carried a small team of humans equipped with medical supplies, engineering tools, and most importantly, the genuine desire to help. They had no weapons beyond basic self-defense, no territorial ambitions, and no hidden agendas, the first. Reports came back within weeks. The Kethmori had been suspicious at first, unable to believe that any species would offer help without demanding something in return. But as the human medical team worked alongside their own healers, sharing knowledge and techniques freely, the suspicion began to fade. They're not trying to take over our world, reported the Kethmori health minister in a transmission that was intercepted by half the galaxy. They're trying to save it. Similar reports began coming in from other missions. The Veltari mining colonies were amazed when human engineers showed them how to extract minerals without destroying their health. The Nimhai refugees wept when humans arrived not to relocate them again but to help them build new homes. Word of humanity's actions spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by grateful species who had never experienced this kind of selfless assistance. The Confederation watched with growing unease as their narrative about primitive, violent humans began to crumble. but the real test was yet to come. Helping forgotten species was one thing, but challenging the established order of galactic civilization was something entirely different. Humanity was about to discover that their greatest strength might also be their greatest danger. The transformation of the galaxy had begun slowly, like ripples spreading across a vast ocean, but within 18 months of humanity's first missions, those ripples had become waves that threatened to reshape the entire galactic order. Commander. Steve Parker stood on the observation deck of the medical station orbiting the Kethmori homeworld, watching as the last of the plague victims were discharged from treatment. The cure had taken only 4 months to develop, combining human medical knowledge with Kethmori biological understanding in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. More importantly, the humans had trained local doctors in the new techniques, ensuring that the Kethmori would never again face such a crisis helplessly. "Commander Parker," came the voice of Dr. Ellen Hayes over the communication system, "the Kethmori Council wants to hold a ceremony to honor our work. They're insisting on offering us territorial rights and mining concessions." Parker smiled as he responded, "Tell them we're honored by the offer, but we can't accept. Suggest they use those resources to build better hospitals instead." The response was typical of how humanity approached every mission. Where other species would have demanded payment or political advantages, humans consistently refused everything except the satisfaction of helping. This behavior was so unprecedented that it was causing confusion throughout the galaxy. On the mining world of Veltar, engineer Kelly Wright was teaching workers how to organize for fair treatment without destroying their economy. The corporate overseers had initially tried to stop her, but when they saw that production actually increased under fair working conditions, they became some of her strongest supporters. "The secret," Wright explained to the gathered miners, "is that happy workers are productive workers. When people feel valued and treated fairly, they want to contribute their best efforts." The concept was revolutionary in a galaxy where most labor was either slave work or barely compensated drudgery. The Veltari workers were producing more minerals than ever before while working fewer hours under safer conditions. The model was spreading to other mining worlds faster than the Confederation could track. Lieutenant Colonel Greg Martinez was coordinating what had become the largest peaceful operation in galactic history. His teams were now active on 47 different worlds, with more requests for assistance arriving daily. The logistics were staggering, but somehow humanity was managing to help everyone who asked. "Sir," reported his aide, Captain Jennifer Scott, "we're getting reports that the Zephyrian Empire is demanding explanations from species that have accepted human assistance. They're claiming that we're violating Confederation space." Martinez studied the reports with growing concern. The Confederation had been content to ignore humanity's actions when they were limited to forgotten worlds and minor species. But now that the human approach was spreading to more established civilizations, the galactic powers were beginning to take notice. "What's our legal status?" Martinez asked. "Technically, we're not violating any laws," Scott replied. "We're not claiming territory, establishing colonies, or interfering with existing governments. We're just helping people who ask for help." The problem was that helping people was having unexpected consequences. When humans showed species that they didn't have to accept oppression, exploitation, or neglect, those species began questioning why they had tolerated such treatment for so long. Dr. Ashley Roberts was documenting the most significant development yet. The 17 species that humans had helped were beginning to communicate with each other, sharing techniques and forming alliances based on the cooperative model they had learned from their human friends. "They're calling it the Mutual Aid Network," Roberts reported in her latest transmission to Earth. "It's not a government or an empire, just species helping each other the way humans help them." The network was growing rapidly, and its existence was making the Confederation leadership nervous. For centuries, they had maintained control by keeping species isolated and dependent on the central authority. The idea of independent cooperation threatened their entire system. On the refugee moon where the Nimhi had been abandoned, Captain Bob Wilson was helping them establish permanent settlements. The work was slow and difficult, but the refugees had something they had never possessed under Confederation rule: hope. "We thought we were worthless," explained Nimhi Elder Colseth to Wilson. "The Confederation treated us like waste products, to be disposed of. You humans showed us that every life has value." The settlements were becoming models of sustainable development, combining human engineering with Nimhi cultural traditions. Other refugee populations throughout the galaxy were requesting similar assistance, and humanity was doing their best to help everyone, but the most dramatic change was happening on the industrial world of Torchwi, where pollution had been poisoning the population for generations. Environmental specialist Dr. Karen Adams had arrived with a team of engineers and scientists, expecting to find a typical cleanup project. Instead, they discovered that the Torchwi had been told by Confederation experts that their pollution was irreversible and that they would have to accept slow environmental death. The human team proved this wrong within weeks, demonstrating cleanup techniques that the Confederation had possessed all along but never shared. "They let us suffer because our deaths were profitable," said Torchwi leader Vashtar in a broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. "The humans showed us that we didn't have to die for someone else's benefit." The revelation that the Confederation had allowed preventable environmental disasters to continue for economic reasons sent shockwaves through galactic society. Species that had accepted their fate as victims of progress began demanding answers and solutions. Ambassador Danny Foster was receiving communications from dozens of species that had never been part of humanity's direct missions. Word of the human approach was spreading faster than the humans themselves could travel, carried by grateful species who shared their stories with anyone who would listen. "We're not trying to overthrow the Confederation," Foster explained in a diplomatic message that was intercepted and analyzed by every major power. "We're just showing people that there are alternatives to acceptance and despair." The message was clear, but the implications were revolutionary. Humanity wasn't conquering the galaxy through force or superior technology. They were conquering it through something far more dangerous to the established order. They were showing people that things could be better. The response from the Confederation was swift and predictable. Trade sanctions were imposed on any species that accepted human assistance. Diplomatic pressure was applied to make cooperation with humans politically dangerous. Military exercises were conducted near worlds that had joined the mutual aid network, but the pressure was having an unexpected effect. Instead of driving species away from humanity, it was making them more determined to find alternatives to Confederation rule. The galaxy was beginning to choose sides, and increasingly, they were choosing the side that offered hope over the side that offered only control. As reports poured in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear: humanity's response to their rejection had started something that could not be stopped. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council chambers looked exactly the same as they had 2 years ago when humanity had been rejected and humiliated, but everything else had changed completely. The same crystal dome stretched overhead, the same rainbow patterns danced across the polished floor, but the atmosphere crackled with tension that had nothing to do with translation devices. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the entrance with the same measured pace he had used during that first visit, but this time, he was not alone. Behind him came a procession that would have been impossible to imagine during his first appearance. Representatives from over 60 species, all walking together in a display of unity that had never been seen in the chamber's 1,000-year history. Vexthara sat on her crystalline throne, but her usual air of supreme confidence had been replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Around the chamber, the leaders of the Confederation's most powerful species watched nervously as the human delegation took their assigned positions. They had called this emergency session to address what they termed the human problem, but they were beginning to realize that the problem was much larger than they had anticipated. The Kethmori delegate stepped forward first, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Honored members of the Confederation," he began, 2 years ago, you rejected humanity's application for membership. Today, I stand here to tell you why that rejection was the greatest mistake in galactic history. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as other species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not how Confederation proceedings usually began, with minor species making accusations against the leadership. When the plague threatened to destroy my people, the Kethmori continued, the Confederation offered no assistance. We were told that our suffering was unfortunate but unavoidable. The humans proved that was a lie. They saved my world, asked for nothing in return, and taught us how to prevent such disasters in the future. The Veltari representative stood next, her metallic voice ringing with emotion. My people worked in conditions that slowly killed us, and we were told this was the price of galactic citizenship. The humans showed us that productivity and safety could work together. Our worlds now produce more resources than ever before, while our workers live with dignity and hope. One by one, species that had been helped by humanity stood to testify about their experiences. The Nimhai spoke of being rescued from abandonment and helped to build new homes. The Torchwi described being saved from environmental disaster and taught how to heal their poisoned world. The pattern was the same in every case. The Confederation had ignored their suffering while humanity had offered genuine assistance. Chancellor Vexthara finally raised her hand for silence, her crystalline features sharp with anger. These testimonials are irrelevant to the matter at hand, she declared. Humanity was rejected for good reason. They are primitive, violent, and unsuited for galactic civilization. Admiral Morrison stepped forward, his uniform as crisp as it had been during his first appearance, but his bearing carried a new confidence born of 2 years of successful missions. Honored Chancellor, he said, his voice respectful but firm, I would like to address those charges directly. You were not given permission to speak, Vexthara snapped. Actually, came a new voice from the back of the chamber, I believe he should be heard. Every head turned in shock as High Counselor Mordic of the Hegemony rose from his seat. The massive alien's decision to support the human's right to speak sent waves of surprise through the assembly. Mordic had been one of humanity's harshest critics during the original rejection. Thank you, Counselor, Morrison said, inclining his head respectfully. 2 years ago, this council called us primitive because we admitted our flaws. You called us violent because we were honest about our struggles with war and conflict. You said we were unfit for galactic society because we refused to pretend we were perfect. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that ranged from hostile to curious. In the time since that rejection, humanity has proven what we are truly capable of. We have helped dozens of species, solved countless problems, and asked for nothing in return except the chance to be good neighbors. Dr. Marcus Webb stepped forward, carrying the comprehensive report that had taken 2 years to compile. If I may, he said, I would like to present our findings about the current state of galactic civilization. The holographic display activated, showing a map of the galaxy marked with different colors. Red zones indicated areas of conflict, oppression, or environmental disaster. Blue zones showed regions where the mutual aid network had established cooperative relationships. The red areas, Webb explained, represent regions under traditional Confederation authority. The blue areas represent regions where humanity's cooperative approach has been adopted. I think the contrast speaks for itself. The display was damning in its clarity. The Confederation's territories were riddled with problems that had been ignored or mismanaged for decades. The areas influenced by humanity showed dramatically improved conditions for civilian populations, increased productivity, and reduced conflict. Ambassador Kate Sullivan, who had spent 2 years rebuilding her confidence after the diplomatic disaster, stepped forward with a tablet full of communications. We have received over 300 requests for assistance from species throughout the galaxy, she announced. Many of these requests come from worlds that are already members of the Confederation. The implication was clear, even established. Confederation members were turning to humanity for help that their own government could not, or would not provide. Chancellor Vexthara's crystalline form seemed to darken as she realized the magnitude of the challenge to her authority. These humans are undermining the stability of our civilization, she declared. Their interference is causing unrest and rebellion throughout our territories. With respect, Morrison replied, we're not causing rebellion. We're simply showing people that their problems can be solved and their lives can be improved. If that threatens your authority, perhaps the problem isn't with our methods. The chamber erupted in heated discussion as species began taking sides. The powerful Confederation members demanded that humanity cease their activities and accept their place as outsiders. The species that had been helped by humans insisted that the cooperative approach was superior to the traditional system. High Counselor Mordic rose again, his massive presence commanding immediate silence. I have spent considerable time investigating human activities, he announced. What I discovered has forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about our own civilization. The chamber held its breath as the hegemony's leader continued. We called them primitive because they admitted their flaws, but honesty requires more courage than deception. We called them warmongers because they refused to hide their struggles, but facing problems directly is braver than pretending they don't exist. We dismiss them as unfit for our society, but perhaps our society is unfit for the galaxy we claim to serve. The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. Mordic was essentially admitting that the Confederation's rejection of humanity had been based on fear rather than wisdom. Morrison stepped forward one final time, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. 2 years ago, you offered us membership in your confederation, then withdrew that offer with insults and rejection. Today, I want to make something clear. We no longer want to join your system. Shocked gasps filled the chamber as Morrison continued. We've learned that there's a better way to organize galactic civilization. One based on cooperation rather than domination, mutual aid rather than exploitation, and honest acknowledgement of problems rather than denial and cover-up. He gestured to the diverse group of species that had accompanied him. These representatives don't come here as supplicants seeking your approval. They come as founders of a new kind of galactic community, one where membership is earned through service rather than demanded through force. Chancellor Vexthara stood, her voice shaking with rage. You cannot simply ignore the established order of the galaxy? Morrison smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had been completely absent from his previous visit. We're not ignoring it, Chancellor. We're replacing it with something better. The session ended in chaos as species throughout the chamber began choosing sides, but the outcome was already clear. Humanity's response to rejection had created something the galaxy had never seen before. A genuine alternative to the ancient system of domination and control. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Morrison made one final statement that would be remembered for generations. You taught us that we didn't need your approval to make the galaxy a better place. Thank you for that lesson. The doors closed behind them, but this time they were walking toward a future they had built themselves, leaving behind a system that had judged them unworthy while proving themselves worthy of something far greater.